Welcome to the Exploring Unschooling podcast. I'm Pam Laricchia, longtime unschooling mom and author. Join me and my wonderful guests for interviews, information, and inspiration about unschooling and living joyfully with your family. You can find the episode show notes, your free introductory ebook, What is Unschooling, and lots more information at livingjoyfully.ca. And here's the show. Hi everyone, I'm Pam Laricchia, and this is episode number 54 of the podcast. It's the 11th of January, 2017, as I record this intro. In this episode, I chat with Grace Koelma. Grace shares with us her journey from teaching in the school system in Australia to an unschooling lifestyle with her young family. We also talk about how attachment parenting can flow into unschooling, helicopter parenting, childism, and the digital homeschooling magazine that she and her husband founded, Mulberry Magazine. As an update around here, things have been pretty low-key this week. I'm finding it surprisingly challenging to settle into a routine, and I'm learning more about how I tick as I dig into it all. Humans are fascinating. Michael was finally home for the first time since Boxing Day, as his work settles down after the holidays. And yesterday was a big snow day here, and we were out shoveling for quite a while. I find that a very peaceful activity. Again, a big thank you to everyone who's supporting the show on Patreon. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me that you enjoy the show and want to help it grow. If you'd like to support the show, even for as little as $1 a month, check out the Exploring Unschooling page at patreon.com. That's patreon.com/exploring unschooling. This week, I wanted to share a quote that I recently came across from Chilton Pearce. We have a cultural notion that if children were not engineered, if we did not manipulate them, they would grow up as beasts in the field. This is the wildest fallacy in the world. In my experience, this is one of the big realizations we encounter on our deschooling journey. There is a widespread conventional assumption that if children aren't, and I love his term, engineered, they will be wild and untamed, unable to function in day-to-day society. That is just not the reality we see in unschooling families. As he says, it's the wildest fallacy in the world. So take a moment this week to really appreciate your child's capabilities, their sincere efforts to figure things out, and the beautiful ways they engage directly and enthusiastically in their days. It is beautiful. And now, on to the interview with Grace. Hi everyone, I'm Pam Laricchia from livingjoyfully.ca, and today I'm here with Grace Koelma. Hi Grace.
Hey Pam, how you doing?
I'm doing very well, and you?
Well, thank you.
Oh, that's great. Just as a little intro, Grace studied primary school teaching at university, but after a year of teaching, she became disillusioned with the mainstream schooling system and pulled the plug on that career. She then followed her other passion, writing, working as a journalist, until she eventually figured out a way to weave together her passions for education, unschooling, and writing. In mid-2015, she and her husband Eric started Mulberry Magazine, an Australia-based digital magazine which aims to include perspectives from all styles and forms of homeschooling, unschooling, and alternative schooling. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about that, but to get us started, Grace, can you share a bit more about you and your family?
Wow, what an intro. Hopefully I can live up to all of that. It sounded a lot nicer how you said it. So my husband and I have been married for almost 5 years. Actually, tomorrow's our anniversary. So yes, 5 years. Yeah, woohoo. Thank you. I don't know what we've got planned yet. It's life with a baby, hey? It's always you never know what you're going to get. Anyway, so we're married. We have one child so far. He's 18 months old and his name's Leo. And we live in Australia, as you mentioned. We live kind of just north of Sydney on the beaches. It's a really beautiful area, lots of natural beauty and bushland and obviously gorgeous beaches. But we're kind of in a bit of a weird stage of life at the moment. We kind of over the last year in 2016 have been really thinking through what it looks like for us to live authentically. And, I guess for us at the moment in our stage of life, whether living in that literally like we own a house with a white picket fence. So whether that kind of suburban lifestyle, living with a baby, and both, Eric was working full time and I was trying to run the magazine, and we were both pretty stressed out and busy and overworked and not having enough time together as a family. And so I guess, we spent the whole year kind of digging into that, and at times, I'll be honest, sort of distracting ourselves from it as well, because sometimes you look at it and you think, what are we going to do? We don't know what we're going to do. And so then you get back into the busyness of life and you forget about it for a while. But eventually it came around enough times, the question of, are we doing what we want to be doing? Is this right for us in this season now? When our son was very small, it really was right for us, but it became not right for us very quickly. My husband was commuting so long every day, he barely got to see us. So we decided to just take a huge leap, and we rented out our house. We sold almost everything we have. And at the moment, we're kind of camping in with my family and Eric's family and house sitting and sort of a bit nomadic. And we probably should get used to that, because next year we'll be traveling the world. So we're buying one-way tickets, and we'll be in Asia and Europe and America and Canada. We're kind of looking to hit almost every continent at the moment. So yeah, it's a pretty crazy time.
Wow, that is very exciting.
I don't know if I mentioned that to you earlier. So yeah,
you did not.
Surprise!
Yay! Oh, so well, yeah, you're getting some plans underway then.
That's right. It's a challenge for me because I'm a planner. And with a baby, you said, I'm constantly wanting to know every single place that we'll visit with him, and what, whether there'll be fences and whether there'll be balconies and rails, all of that. So it's going to be a bit of a fun one for me as a bit of a control freak, and trying to sort of let go of that a little and just experience stuff. But my husband is the opposite, so he levels me out.
Oh, that's awesome. And I do remember that, like, that was something that having kids and being with my kids really helped me with, because I did always like to be, in control and have plans and follow through on them. And, that was just my personality. But I finally got to see through them, with their much more open approach to, just their days. As things came up and looked interesting, they did them. And it was really cool to start to realize how much more there was beyond, what little like schedule or routine or control, that I had in front of me, that there was just so much more cool things in the world if I was if I was able to be open to it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's a bit of a mind shift once you figure that out. So yeah, it's a fun journey.
Yeah, it definitely is. Well, let's step back a little bit then in your journey, because you had mentioned that you had studied primary school teaching at university and had taught for a year. So I was hoping you could chat with us about what you discovered about children and learning through that experience.
Yeah. So much. So I guess just to sort of start off with it for a bit of a picture of it all, I come from a family of teachers. My dad taught for 20 years and he was an amazing teacher. He actually taught me at one stage in his class in sixth grade. So I guess I saw how he was as a teacher. He was that sort of wild, sort of to sir with love type teacher, just to name one archetype, but all of those kind of Robin Williams style teachers that you get in the films. Just really inspiring and outside the box. And I saw myself as someone who loved learning and loved to see children learn. And I didn't have any kids of my own, so at that point I was only 19 or something. I thought I'd study teaching and pursue that passion. But I was very quickly disillusioned with all of it, really, even just in university alone. Just with the way that education was presented to us as just being something that you tick off the list, a whole lot of rules and regulations, a whole lot of exams and tests, like teachers were taught to be able to assess children, and just the way that my lecturers taught us about things was just hypocritical. They'd be teaching us about engaging students, and they'd be doing it from the front of a lecture theatre with black and white slides, and would be sending us all to sleep. They hadn't set foot in a classroom in 25 years, probably. They were very academic, and it just didn't feel like the love of learning that I'd experienced and that I wanted to share, I guess. So I sort of stuck it out for the 4 years, and I did some of my practicums in schools, and I had some really interesting teachers, let's put it that way, as my mentors. I sort of seemed to always land the assistant principal. So the person that was kind of the level of a principal in terms of responsibility, but still in the classroom, which meant that they were constantly out of the classroom and just using me as their casual teacher to teach. And they were really jaded, and the way they spoke about their students was just, I don't know. It just didn't put a lot of confidence in me that they really were there to see their students thrive. And let me just caveat this by saying that I'm not at all against teachers. I have been one. I know how hard many of them work. I just happen to see a few of the ones that probably should have retired. So that was all pretty interesting for me, and I really was starting to lose all hope in the education system. But I gave it a year, and I did some teaching, and I actually got my own class in my first year out. A year 4 class, so like 9 or 10-year-olds in Australia. And the school that I was in was a really different experience. Again, it was in Western Sydney, a lot of different cultures in Western Sydney, kids from all over the world. And I basically got told on the first day that I had been given the hardest hardest class in the school. So that was a great way to start my career, just with that knowledge. And I threw myself into it. I told myself that it didn't matter, and I would love the kids anyway. And many of them were gorgeous kids, but the system wasn't supporting me, and I was doing my best. And I had kids that were just really violent, to be honest. Just came from a really violent upbringing, or had seen a lot of violence with a lot of them had older teenage cousins or brothers and sisters that were out in the streets. And that they brought that into the classroom, and I felt unsafe. I felt like I couldn't keep the kids safe. I was in the middle of like a lesson that I prepared and thrown my heart and soul into, and I really wanted to see the kids have those amazing moments where they understood things, they learned to love a particular subject. And I would be constantly interrupted by a child strangling another child. Just stuff that is just really, it shouldn't be on any teacher, but let alone a first year out teacher. So I stuck it out, but I was slowly being broken down by it. And I guess the hardest thing beyond seeing the violence of the kids was seeing the kids that didn't think that they could do it, who had been told because of the grading systems, because of the assessment and the standards that they weren't meeting, that they'd been sort of told a message that they were stupid. And these kids didn't think they could do things. And I would always be wanting to see these students sort of discover that they could. And I remember vividly sitting with one girl who she was in grade 4, as I said, but she had been told that she had the reading level of a grade 1 child. And so she just never thought she could do anything with reading. And we were sitting there reading together, and she had this amazing breakthrough, and she discovered something about words and connecting the dots, and it all made sense, and her eyes just lit up. And I was in that moment with her thinking, this is why I studied teaching. I love seeing that moment, which unschooling parents would get to see all the time, of course, and being the nature of the one-on-one or one-on-two sort of interactions. And I saw that with her, and then in the split second that I saw it, I was pulled away. I was called in to manage another fight happening across the classroom because I'd been focusing on her, and the rest of the class had gone crazy. And that was sort of the end of my patience with that. I just thought, I can't do this anymore. It's not for me. I need to be able to invest in children on a much smaller ratio. 1 to 30 doesn't work. So I think it's not the fault of the teacher often. It's the fault of a faulty system. So that was sort of my journey with that. And And I guess I learned through that about learning that it can't be boxed in, it can't be scheduled, it can't be time limited. Otherwise, children become either disengaged, or if they think that they're academic, if they've been told by their parents that they're an academic child, you see those sort of children memorizing, rote learning. They're not truly taking anything in. It's, what is the quality of learning if it's not sticking with you, if it has no purpose? I really started to consider those things. So there we go.
That's quite the experience.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, no, that's I really like the point. Well, a couple of points there, but one thing that has really stood out for me lately is how much they're not even really negative messages, but it's just you're not just from your grades, and the impression that kids get that they're not good at this or they're not good at that, and how that really stifles them ever even trying it soon after, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. The love of learning is so quickly squashed when you put a test in at the end of something. And I think that's even true for adults, So it's not only kids that this relates to. I think all of us want to just learn and enjoy the process of learning and not be, tested every single time.
Yeah, no, it really helped me to think about my own learning when we started unschooling, when I started looking at unschooling, and because I did well at school by those standards, but I could look back and see, well, how much of it do I remember? Which did I enjoy? And so much of it was just, it was working the system. It wasn't about learning by, certainly before high school, it wasn't about the learning. It was just about the process and doing well at the process, because that was what you needed for the next step and the next step. So to start looking and just focusing on the learning itself and saying, it's the learning that's important. That was a huge step for me when I was deschooling.
Definitely. It's like a sink or float, isn't it? So with a lot of kids. Cool. Yeah.
Well, let's take the next step from when you decided you were going to leave teaching. I was wondering how you went from feeling disenchanted, basically, with the formal education system and leaving it, to embracing the unschooling lifestyle, because even that's a big step too. So I was wondering what deschooling has looked like for you.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I know that it looks different for everyone. For me, I really enjoyed reflecting on this question, because often deschooling happens subconsciously. You don't sit down one day and say, I'm going to deschool myself. Yeah. I didn't even know that's what I was doing. I only heard of the term deschooling about a year ago. But yeah, I definitely had a bit of a unique sort of I've called it a 3-stage process. So the first stage was my disenchantment, as you mentioned, with school, and it wasn't even just an adult or a parent reflecting on their schooling. It was partly that, but it was my disenchantment with being a teacher in a schooling system. So I didn't even want to do it as a career anymore. So that was my first step. Get out of there as quick as you can. What else can I do to spend my time, to earn some money? I'd always wanted to be a writer. So I had the amazing opportunity to start writing for an Australian news website, and I was able to write all kinds of stories, but, I started off by really being their go-to person on education, and I wrote several articles on the education system and criticizing it. So that was my first step, getting away from the school, starting a different career. And then I had a bit of a natural second stage, which sort of came with pregnancy. And, I think a lot of mums really would acknowledge and agree with the fact that when you get pregnant, something switches in your brain. It's really interesting. I found that I suddenly started thinking of my child, my unborn child, and what I would do for him and what I wanted for him. The whole world shifted. It wasn't just about me anymore and what I was able to cope with. It was about what I wanted for his upbringing and his education. So then I started researching homeschooling, and I started off just with homeschooling. And I guess I also was always going to be more open to that because I was homeschooled for a few years growing up by my parents and with my siblings. We did some school at home type approaches when I was in primary school for a few years, and then I also did some homeschooling years with sort of traveling around Australia in a caravan. So that was school on the road, very much more informal and bit more haphazard.
Yeah.
When I was about 15, I did that. So yeah, I had already experienced just glimpses, of this amazing way of life and learning, and I loved the idea of it. And so I sort of started researching it, and of course I had my husband, who had only ever been to a public school his whole life, who was just thinking, what? I was okay with you being homeschooled, like a little bit, but the idea of us homeschooling our son, what on earth are you talking about? That's the craziest idea ever, he said. It's funny how people's reactions can change though so much, and now he's 100% for unschooling actually. So yeah, it's been a big journey. So I went through that, and as a part of that, I just chatted to heaps of homeschooling parents with the magazine, and that whole thing was just an amazing opportunity for me to just learn from people who were 5 years, 10 years ahead of me. And all kinds of approaches. And then I read those sort of key books that most unschoolers have read, like John Holtz, John Taylor Gatto. I remember reading Weapons of Mass Instruction by John Taylor Gatto, and just, I wanted to tell everyone all about it, talk about it all the time. And I just thought, I just can't. It's just too huge. And most people it's just too confronting, I think, to think of the school system like the way he explains it. And I don't know how different it is in Australia as well. Like, that's the American system, and how many similarities. So it's sort of hard to read that and go, that applies exactly to what I had in school. But even just the discipline and all those sort of things, so a lot of it rang very true. The coercive nature of school, I guess, and the sort of training people in a maths mentality, I guess.
Yeah.
So, and then finally there was that incredible TED Talk that most people reference as well by Ken Robinson on how children learn. That was really instrumental in shaping my opinion and just helping me develop a more adult response to what I saw education as being and what it wasn't as well. And then from there, I sort of took the leap further from homeschooling into unschooling. And I remember the first time I heard of unschooling, I read about it in a news article when I was a journalist, and the news article was just completely cynical of it. And so that sort of helped shape my opinion initially of it. I thought I really was still coming from that teaching at home, sort of setting up a school at home kind of perspective of it, and thinking, how on earth can you not have any textbooks or have any curriculums? And so I was really quite taken aback by that concept. But again, learning and listening to unschooling parents, and I sort of call it natural learning. I prefer to use that term, natural learning and child-led learning, and that really started to get my attention. I sort of saw it as unschooling as quality over quantity. So instead of rushing through a curriculum, getting the quantity of information in the year, it was more the quality of what the child was learning. They might spend 3 months on something that interests them, but that is, even though they wouldn't be covering as many topics in a year potentially, that quality was far better than the quantity. It was depth over memorization. It was relevance for the child instead of a forced or imposed curriculum that they wouldn't have chosen because it wasn't what they were interested in. So I started seeing those aspects of it and really being drawn towards those aspects of it. Yeah.
That's very cool. I love the way you describe that, because that's one of the things I find fascinating watching unschooled kids is, seeing what they choose to dive into deeply. What catches their interest, because it's different for everybody, right? And what they choose to just dive so deeply in and get attracted. It's just so fascinating to see.
Totally.
Yeah. I was wondering if you could share a little bit, because you were talking about your husband, how at first he thought it was crazy until, as you started learning more. So how did you share it with him to help him start to learn about the stuff that you were learning about?
I mean, my strategy, I'm not sure if everyone could emulate it, but I got him to proofread our magazine. So, I mean, obviously that's just very unique to our situation, but I would put together an issue and it would have all these interviews and all these stories from homeschooling families. And I would say, hey, honey, can you proof? And it wasn't even that he wouldn't have read it. It was just that he was quite busy and he didn't have a lot of time for leisure reading. But if I said to him, oh, can you proofread this for me? It was a job, it was something that was necessary to get the magazine out on time. And so he'd sit on the train and read through it. And there was no ulterior motive really. Like that was all just me wanting his help. And then later on, he told me that actually he was amazed at all the things he was reading in the articles, and it completely helped to, over time, change his perspective. So I guess because I wasn't berating him and annoying him and constantly like, honey, let's talk about this. My son was at that stage only 8 months old. There was no rush, I was learning about it. He was learning about it. And we were sharing what we discovered as we discovered it. So, yeah, but I mean, that's not something that not everyone can emulate, I guess. So hopefully that's a bit helpful.
Yeah, I mean, you work with the circumstances that you have. And I think one of the, like you alluded to, I think one of the most important things was asking for his help, or, for other parents, maybe sharing information, but doing that without expectation, right? You're not berating them. You're not like, I expect you to read, understand, and agree with this or anything. It's sharing interesting bits the way they like to hear it, or as you had a purpose. It's funny because we recently had, when I interviewed Roberto, who did the Spanish translation of Free to Learn, he did the same thing because he was hoping his parents would understand unschooling a little bit better. And so he asked his dad to proofread his translation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, it's obviously it's a strategy that works.
It's just a way to share information, and people, he's certainly willing to help, right, when they can, and certainly they can give that editing help, that proofreading help, and if the information that they're actually reading connects with them, that's great. So that's very cool. Thank you. The next question, children really are truly intrinsically hardwired to learn right from birth, right? And when we focus on our connection with them through an attachment parenting style and support that drive to learn right from the moment they're born, that can flow rather seamlessly into unschooling, can't it?
Oh, definitely. And again, this is not something, attachment parenting was not a term that I at all had in my vocabulary when I was pregnant. Yep. I was just focusing on getting through those days in pregnancy. So, and even in the early days with a newborn, you're just in survival mode a lot of the time, very little sleep. And when my son got to an age where he was, much more self-sufficient, he could play by himself for longer periods of time. He didn't need constant watching every second. I felt like mentally I could start to talk and discuss and investigate different styles of parenting. I think it's one of those things where when you come across an idea, whether it's conscious parenting, attachment parenting, any of those labels, and there's something in the very, nutshell of that idea that you just completely agree with. It's just something that resonates with you at a deep level. You just kind of go for it, you gravitate towards it. And that's really what happened. It was stuff that I'd already been thinking about and I didn't know how to articulate. Things that I just felt like I wanted to be as a mum, and ways that I wanted to see my son learn and to facilitate and encourage that learning and development, I guess. So one of the books that I read that really shaped it for me was Simplicity Parenting by Kim John Payne. And I'm not sure if you've read that book, but it basically talks about the importance of parents as being architects of our family's daily lives. So I think it's great, before you start unschooling to still see your role as a parent as being a very vital one in shaping the sort of environment that your child is learning and growing in, even from the second that they're born. And through that book, the whole book talks about basically simplifying environments and schedules and taking away toys, and not all toys, but quite a lot of the toys that distract our children, that overwhelm them. And I started to see by reading that book that I wasn't really giving my son great messages. He's only 18 months, but children just soak in information and they soak in what we're doing. They observe everything. And I just realized that I kind of, like what I was saying earlier, that I was overworked, I was busy, I was stressed, and I was distracted. I was constantly looking at my phone, and he was noticing that. And it was a bit of a shock to see my 14-month-old race every time he saw my bag at his height. He'd race for it, and the first thing he'd pull out was my phone. And I thought, oh my goodness, I have never said to him, my phone is important, my phone is really special, my phone is valuable, and yet he knows. And I thought, what is that? What messages am I sending? And so that kind of started off my journey into attachment parenting and being more conscious about what I do. Obviously, I still have a phone, but I choose to use it, at different times when he's asleep, or I try not to look at it very much anymore. I measure the success of my day in that regard by how much battery power is left at the end of the day on my phone. So if it's at 75%, I think, yep, I haven't checked my phone too much. And if it's at 20% or it's dying, I think, uh-oh. So yeah, I guess it's about being present. And the other thing I've learned about parenting through all of that is that there's a bit of a fallacy. I think people tend to panic and go towards one end of the scale. So they either stimulate their children with too many toys, and they fill their space with these light up gadgets and these closed-ended one-use items for the little babies, and the babies don't know what to do with them. And if they play with them, they play with them quickly and then they move on. And so I looked carefully at my son's space, and I took out the things that I felt weren't helping him move on or explore deeply, and I just left the things that he loved, that he spent the most time with, the things that he could manipulate and change. And the other thing I did was I took away the expectation of myself to always be with him, asking him questions and stimulating him with my presence. Because as important as it is to be engaged and connected with your child, I mean, one of the best quotes I read early on with a very young baby is that they don't need toys. What they need is you. They need their parent. They need their parent looking at them in the eye and talking to them. And all of that is so important. And I do have times with my son regularly where I do that, and it's amazing. But the other thing I learned through Simplicity Parenting was, particularly when children get to that age between about a year and 18 months where they can play more independently by themselves, they go into this thing that Kim John Payne calls like a deep meditative play, and it's like they're in a trance, and I suppose that's when they're really learning very quickly or very deeply about something. They're experimenting, and you almost, if you were to call their name, they wouldn't turn around. And I learned that it wasn't necessary for me to go into those moments where Leo was doing that. He's a very focused child. He's always been that way. So he can spin the blades of a helicopter for half an hour, And I'd learn not to go in every time and ask him and try and make it into a learning experience. By my standards, I'm still deschooling. It takes a while. And so I would learn to just watch. And that was so freeing to learn that I didn't have to rush in, and he was actually self-sufficient. He was getting everything he needed from spinning the helicopter blades. So yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I really do, because, I would call that, like, in older kids, whatever, being in the flow, right? Being so deeply engaged in what it is they're doing that, they don't hear their name being called. If they had a sense of time, it would be like times just flies by. You don't even know where it went, right? When you're in an active flow. And Absolutely. I would spend a lot of time, definitely not interrupting them, right? Because you're breaking them out of all these connections and just their engagement with that activity. Even if it looks like they're doing the same thing like over and over and over, it's amazing. Yeah, I think that the really exciting learning is happening there. And you know what? Certainly, when you first come to unschooling, you're really looking for the learning, because that helps you understand how it works. But, later on, it's just, you can just start looking for the fun, looking for the engagement, finding the things that they're engaged with, because you know that the learning's happening. So, eventually you don't really start looking for the learning, and you don't feel like you need to justify or prove to yourself that the learning's happening. But it does really help to realize that when you're first understanding, how unschooling works. But I think that was such a great point, to even when they're really young, when they're engaged and in a moment, we don't need to interfere. Right? Even if we think we're stepping into like, oh, but look, when you turn it this way, no, they'll turn it the other way when they're ready to, when that occurs to them or whatever. We don't have to point out the other 5 things that they can do in that moment, right?
Yeah, totally. It makes me think of a quote, and I feel like it's a John Holt quote, but don't hold me to it. And he says, when you teach a child something, you forever take away the chance of them learning it themselves.
And discovering it, yep.
Yeah, that's paraphrased. But yeah, it really is that. And I do think it comes back to trusting your child. And I think, we can probably talk about that later as well. There's more to say about children and how we treat them, but they from the get-go, they're very attuned. They know exactly what they need. Even newborn babies can very, very loudly and clearly express what they need. And, children are just, they're very highly attuned to it. They're very in touch with their senses and with their needs. And if we learn to trust them, then who knows what could happen if you trust your child. I'm still learning.
It's beautiful.
Yes.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. You wrote a great post you shared with me about the 11 biggest myths around homeschooling. And there was one in particular that I wanted to chat with you about, and that was that homeschooling parents are micromanaging helicopter parents. Now, I know it can sometimes look like that from the outside, but our engagement with our children is coming from a completely different perspective, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I think just to answer that question, you first have to sort of delve into why people see and who perceives homeschooling parents as micromanaging helicopter parents. When I wrote that article, I was just trying to get into the mind of the people, who said these things so I could debunk the myths. So I think, first thing that comes to mind is that we are now living in a culture of outsourcing, of finding an expert who can do it better than us in many situations. And so we have accountants and we have house cleaners and we get our shopping delivered. We order it online and get it delivered to our house. And if we don't know where to put our couch and which painting to put up, we get a home decorator. Not all of us can afford that. I certainly can't, but a lot of us do. And I think into that category falls education. Most parents, in the world outsource their children's education to the experts, the school teachers, and that's the norm. And the way that then plays out is that teachers are the experts and parents are made to feel in some settings, not every setting, but what I observed from my teaching experience and other settings is that parents are made to feel like they actually don't know anything about how their children operate and what their children love learning about and how to see their kids succeed. They take their kids to the teacher and for their parent-teacher interview, and the teacher lists off a whole lot of big terms about reading and phonics and pedagogy and connecting and synthesizing and all these words that might make parents feel like learning is complicated and hard and they couldn't do it at home with their kids. And I don't know why that is. I mean, I think I know why that is, but it's a big generalization to sort of say that teachers separate themselves as experts, because I think they want to remain relevant. They don't want their jobs to become obsolete, and that's teaching at a much higher level, not just the individual teachers in the classroom. I think it's a systemic thing. And so, teachers have invented this language of education, and I think that to that, homeschooling and unschooling parents come as a fair bit of a threat, because they're not subdued by the school system. They're not, running to the teachers every time they have an issue with their kids. I've heard many stories of parents who went to their school principal when their kids were enrolled and said, we want to take them out and homeschool them. And the principal just went crazy at them and said, you're a helicopter parent, you're micromanaging, you're controlling, you're a control freak, you're not letting your kids be free, you're trying to keep them under your thumb, which I think is interesting. Because I could say the same about school.
Yeah.
To an extent. So not every school, but yeah, and not every principal is like that. But it's interesting that as soon as you start to threaten the norm and sort of step out in a new direction that's countercultural as a parent, straight away it gets labeled as micromanaging and helicopter parenting or control freak or whatever you want to call it. And I just wanted to sort of address that it's not necessarily that that's what's going on. It's the cultural expectation around that and going against that, I guess. I think that from the inside, and I haven't actually unschooled or homeschooled yet, my son, but from what I've learned from talking to people, parents are really just putting their kids' best interests first. They're trying to do what's best for them. And I've seen a lot of times parents actually helping their kids explore different mentors, different people that can give them a broader perspective. It's homeschooling. Another of the myths that I addressed in that article is that homeschooling always happens in the home, that kids are bubble wrapped and inside and never allowed out into society, unsocialized. And actually, in fact, they're often outside more often with other adults and meeting people and seeing a different perspective. And their parents are there to help that happen. But they're by no means, indoctrinating them or, feeding ideas into their heads or anything like that, I don't think. So, yeah, it's just a misconception.
Yeah, I kind of, the way it visualizes in my mind when I think about helicopter parenting versus unschooling parenting, helicopter parenting I see it as coming from above, right? Because the parents have certain expectations of their children, and they're trying to control the situation so that their kids meet those expectations, right? Mm-hmm. And whereas unschooling parents, yeah, they're around their kids a lot too, but they're there kind of from underneath. They're providing support to help their kids accomplish what their kids are wanting to do, right? So even though, both kinds of parents are engaged with, are interacting with their children regularly. One's coming from like a top-down controlling perspective, and one's coming from a below support, I'm going to help you out kind of perspective. That's kind of how I've really always envisioned them.
Good way. Yeah, it's a very visual way of it. Yeah, it's really helpful. Thank you for that.
Oh, no problem.
I found that very helpful. Yeah.
And another term that I've been hearing more about lately is childism, referring to a systemic prejudice against children, just as a group, stemming from belief more that children are property and should be controlled and should, do what they're told. I was wondering if you could share some of your thoughts around that, because I think that's a topic close to your heart, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it's a new topic close to my heart. Again, it's another piece of the puzzle, when you start to discover and surf blogs on these topics, and you find something else. And so, yeah, childism has sort of risen up in the last few months even as something that I'm aware of now, and something, again, that I felt very strongly but I couldn't articulate. And for me, from what I've understood of childism, it's basically children receiving the message that they're less important, less intelligent, less deserving of respect, unequal and inferior. It's just things like dismissing their opinions and disregarding their preferences. So if a child doesn't want to hug their uncle and a parent says, no, you have to hug your uncle, that's what we do in this family. That's childism. It's wanting to control them. It's using emotional and physical bribery to do that. And that's a really harsh way of putting it. But I guess people, childism is something that's so accepted in our society, and it has been the done thing for centuries, really, that it takes strong language to shock people out of it. And it took that for me, that kind of strong language. It's when an adult believes that they deserve respect because they're older, but they don't in turn respect the child. And what I found, even through thinking about this further, is that childism isn't only limited to how we treat our children. It sort of stems and flows on into how an adult, a young adult perhaps, but an adult is treated in the workplace. And how I've found that a lot of workplaces I've worked in have just felt like school again, like your teacher, like your boss is your teacher, and they just think that they know so much more than you that nothing you have to say matters. So I think that I say that to sort of emphasize that it's something that's very deeply rooted in our culture, and it starts with children. And if we don't fix it, it's just going to continue. The cycle is going to continue, because the parents that are currently treating their children like this are probably those that were treated like that when they were kids. And they had to suffer in silence and to be trod on and stepped on and have their opinions disregarded for the first 15 to 18 years of their life, perhaps. And now it's their turn when they become parents. It's their time to be the parent. And I guess that perpetuates the cycle. So, yeah, it's something I'm still exploring.
Yeah, it's got a lot to do with the power dynamic, right? You said, now that they're finally an adult, it's their turn, right? I mean, so many times, even as kids, we hear, well, when you're a parent, when you're an adult, when it's your house, you can make those decisions or those choices. You can have a say. But now you're in my house, so this is the way it is. Because I think that way of treating children has been around for a long time, as you say. But it's interesting to see a generalized term come up more recently, right? Because I think it just helps kind of group it together. Not just saying be nice to your kids or, whatever, but actually I think it helps encourage conversation around it, right? Like as you're finding, as you're digging into it, it's like, oh, yeah, because so much of it is just the way we've treated children for decades, for a long time, the way we've been treated, the way our parents were treated. So it's really interesting. I think what it can do when you can get a term like that, it can just spread awareness, because so many people don't even realize that there's another way, right? This is just how we raise children. And to see that, oh, geez, there's people who are, who have a completely different relationship with their children that isn't power-based, adult power over children. Wow. How does that work? It can start raising questions, right? Have people asking questions.
Definitely. And that's always a good thing, to even start at questions and see where that leads you.
Yeah, exactly. I even say that about homeschooling because I hadn't heard of homeschooling when I first had children. Just knowing that other possibilities are out there helps people realize that this is a choice they're making. They think, I would tell my kids, sorry, we have to go to school. Let's make it as good as we can, So I worked a lot with the schools and with my kids' teachers and everything to make the experience more enjoyable, until I discovered it wasn't a law.
Yeah.
That there were other possibilities, other choices. So just letting people know that there are other possibilities out there, so that when they're ready for it, when they're ready to start asking questions, they know that there's other possibilities. So that's really interesting.
And I think that's key, is it's when you're ready. And so many things, it's why I've learned never to push my views on people. And as excited as I am about all this stuff I'm learning, I will casually mention it if someone asks why I'm speaking to my son in a certain way, or why I let him, give him freedom to roam in the park and try things, and I don't rush over to him when he falls over. Like, there's things that I do that are very different and people notice. And if they ask me, I can tell them, but I'm certainly not going to start, what I just said on this podcast. I'm not going to just throw that at people. It's a lot to take in, and unless asked. And I think it just because I'm in a headspace where I'm learning about it doesn't mean they're ready, and it can actually do more damage if you just throw it at them when they're not. So I think it's always a case of just waiting till people are ready to hear it.
Yeah, because if you don't, then it just puts them on the defensive, right? Which closes them off to being open to other possibilities. And I always figured we're just out and about in the world living, and we're just, people can just see other possibilities, right? They could just see how you are different with your kid. And if they're interested enough to ask questions, or, maybe even when they go home, they talk to somebody else or whatever. But instead of confronting people, we just live the way we live, out in the world, and it's just another example for people to notice or not, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. Our last question, we get to this story. You and your husband founded Mulberry Magazine. It's a quarterly digital magazine, as I said, that covers homeschooling, unschooling, and alternative education. So I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about how that came about. And I love hearing about some of the different ways that families are supporting their unschooling lifestyle. So that's always really interesting. There's such a wonderful variety. So that would be cool.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's been a fun journey. So I guess it started off with me, as I said, when I was pregnant, Googling homeschooling and Googling things and looking for things. And there is so much, as I'm sure you'd know, in the US and Canada, because it's huge over there. Something like, 1 million kids, I think, are homeschooled in the US. And so, it's just something that I felt like I really wanted to see more stories from where I grew up, and I knew that there were people here doing it. And so I just really started talking to those people in my local neighborhood and looking for Australian stories to add into the mix, I guess. And it's just been a really amazing journey of connection, to be honest, particularly in our Instagram community, which I just started because I love that platform personally. And I just started, connecting with homeschooling mums on there, and they have been a great support, even though they're not physical friends in my life. I still feel like we're friends because we all share that like-mindedness that comes, that the passion for all of this stuff that we've been talking about today. You could talk with them about it for hours, So I think it's particularly because I started off the magazine. Actually, I started off feeling very inadequate and very underqualified and thinking, what the heck am I doing? I'm not even homeschooling yet. All I've got to sort of add some legitimacy is that I have been homeschooled, story of success, if you will. She turned out okay, but I just felt like, why am I doing this? And then I sort of thought, well, number one, no one else is in Australia. No one else was doing our kind of magazine and reaching our audience, I guess, without the visual kind of medium that it is. And the other thing was, I thought, well, I know what it feels like to be at the beginning. And sometimes when you've been doing homeschooling for 10 or 15 years, I imagine that it could feel like, oh, isn't everyone in this headspace? I'm so used to it now, and why on earth are you worried about that particular thing? Or so I think starting from the beginning, literally with the magazine and with the beginning of my journey into homeschooling, has just really given me a perspective of what people might need, particularly people who are exploring it in the early stages of having a baby. And people do start exploring it 3 or 4 years before their kids reached school age now. And the whole thing about convincing your partner, or not even convincing, but getting your partner on board, because I think it is a decision that should be mutual with parents. It shouldn't be forcing that decision on your husband or partner. And you want that full support. So yeah, we've been through it all in our family, and I'm able to then share that drive to learn with everyone that reads it, and with the people that I connect with and get to interview. So it's actually been an amazing privilege for me to be able to do it, and connect with people and be so inspired even before I start formally doing it when Leo turns 5. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. I mean, I can see how your perspective would really, bring coming to it, learning as much as your readers are as well, right? So the kind of questions that they'd be interested in are like right on the tip of your tongue, and you can use that position, to reach out, right? And get the kind of information and talk to the kind of people that you're interested in. And that would be so useful for your readers too, right?
Yeah. And I think another thing that comes to mind is that, having worked in the media industry, I've seen the way that homeschooling, not even unschooling, people don't even dig that far in really. It's always just homeschooling. And I've seen the way it's positioned and sold as a headline. I know what people think about it. And I had to sit in many meetings and just be quiet. I worked for a parenting website too, where the topic came up a bit more frequently, and I had to bite my tongue a few times at the comments that they would make about crazy homeschooling parents. And so I really do come at it from the real strong desire to just basically show people that it's not like that. It's actually amazing and beautiful, and it can be visually beautiful as well. So in the magazine, we do, try and show that side of it too, that, there is a lot to be said for the beauty of home learning and, connecting people, helping people feel less alone, to feel like they've got a village around them that thinks the same way. A lot of people do have family that disagree or directly oppose their decision, and that would be really difficult, I think, if you announced that you wanted to do that to your family and then they all just said, well, that's a completely stupid idea, why would you think of that? And a lot of people express that that's what's happened to them, and then they say when they find a community of people on Instagram or however they might find it, it's just exactly what they needed. So that keeps me going, those sort of stories keep me going. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I think that's such a great point from your background in journalism as well, right? You already have a good feel for the way it's being seen outside, from the outside looking in. So that's really cool. And I must say, it is a very beautiful magazine. I was just like,
Oh, thank you.
As I was looking through that, it's such a great job. Thank you guys so much for all the work that you put into it. That's awesome.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Oh,
it's been a great chat.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I do want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me, because it's been tons of fun. I really enjoyed hearing more about you guys. That's great.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity, Pam. It's been awesome to chat with you too.
Oh, no problem. Before we go, where's the best place for people to connect with you online?
Yeah, you can, our Instagram account that I mentioned where we connect with heaps of homeschooling mums is Mulberry Magazine, all one word. And the same for our website, mulberrymagazine.com.au. So that's the main places that I hang out when I'm trying not to look at my phone, of course. That's always taken that into consideration. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Oh, no problem. I will share links to all those places and to that article in the show notes, and I'll look up that Simplicity Parenting book as well. Thank you very much for your time, Grace. Have fun with Eric and Leo.
Will do. Thanks, Pam. Catch you later.
Hey. Yeah. Bye. Thanks for listening. I hope you found it helpful. You might also like the backlist episodes at livingjoyfully.ca/podcast. While you're there, be sure to check out the second book in my Living Joyfully with Unschooling series, Free to Live, Create a Thriving Unschooling Home. In it, I dive into the 4 characteristics that I found helped unschooling flourish in our home: curiosity, patience, strong relationships, and trust. One reviewer wrote, "Really enjoyed this short and sweet book. It has marvelous one-liners, and though I'm not an underliner, I found myself underlining on every page." Another said, "I believe it would benefit any homeschooler or parent to read this book, as it re-emphasizes the importance of the relationship between a parent and a child in the learning process. I plan to reread this book. It is rich and full of gems. Give yourself some time to absorb it before rushing into unschooling." Until next time, have fun living and learning with your family.